Hello everyone, this is Janet Cape with the Social Light Production, where we are connecting the world through faith, culture, and entertainment. I am excited to be here today with my handsome cousin, Yujay Harris. I'll let him introduce himself in a second, but go ahead and say hi to the people.
How y'all doing? Hello.
Hi, y'all see that? Let me stop. No, I'm excited for this conversation because Yujay and I, we talk all the time. And one of the things we speak about is mental health. This is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so, as I said, I will let him introduce himself and we'll get into it. But real quick, for those who are new to the platform, the mission of a Social Light Production is connecting the world through faith, culture, and entertainment. Faith, which is influencing culture through faith, through my faith in Christ, right? Culture is authentically highlighting our stories. And when I say our story, we actually represent Liberian Americans. So we're highlighting the culture and beyond. And then entertainment through media and production. One of the things that we do is bridge the gap. This conversation today is definitely bridging the gap as it relates to mental health. It's highlighting it differently and talking about it from a relatable perspective for those who get uncomfortable at the topic, right? But yeah, that's a little bit about me and the platform, but I'm going to hand it off to you, Jay, to talk a little bit about yourself. Tell the people first who you are, and then second, what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and to be part of this opportunity. It's a great service that John is doing for the community. I am Yujay Harris. I was born in Liberia and lived in Liberia until the Civil War started, and we lived through that. My family lived through that experience for a few months and had to really face a lot of very difficult, traumatic, life-shaping events. Mm-hmm. And then we were fortunate to eventually leave Liberia, get to the Ivory Coast, where we stayed as refugees for a little bit, and then make it to the U.S. And I've been extremely blessed over my life. I was fortunate to get some good education here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and go into country day school and into Davidson, and then get an MBA from UNC Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. And you know, I'm a believer, a Christ follower, which is probably the biggest part of my identity. I'm a dad, a son, you know, a brother, and so forth. But one of my passions is definitely mental health, and I over the last several years of my life, I've really come to appreciate that part of health and how important it is that I'm intentional about my mental health as much as I'm intentional about my physical health.
Right.
You know, and for work, I work as a marketing consultant, so for a company that does market research. But I've worked in basically marketing for the last several years at Coke, at Kraft, at Lance, at Bank of America, different companies doing marketing management, product strategy, that kind of work, and I really love it too. But mental health is probably one of my passions that I can talk about quite a lot. So, to add, I lead and I'm the president of an organization called Psychology for All. And my passion for mental health led me to becoming a board member of this organization in 2015. And over the last few years, I've actually been leading the organization, and that's one of the reasons why John invited me to be part of this conversation today.
Yes. And Yujay he's not sitting here as an expert, right? He's just closely related to the field. We've had a lot of conversations around mental health.
Right.
So I just want to invite you guys into the room as we talk about this very important topic. So
exactly.
Thank you. And so we're about to get into this juicy conversation. I'm saying juicy because it's just filled with a lot of different points as it relates to mental health that I think will be helpful for you guys to hear it from Yujay's perspective. So you ready, Yujay?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. You know, mental health awareness is just a huge, I don't want to even say pandemic, but yeah, it's kind of like a pandemic because it's starting to, you know, the way when life happens, we happen, right? We evolve either for the better or for the worse, right? And I think sometimes we don't talk about this issue enough, and sometimes it's discussed at a high, stuffy level, not to be offensive, but you know, just medical terms. But I wanted to still keep the conversation leveled up, but kind of bring it down for everyday people, especially those individuals who don't like to talk about it or who may think that they don't have issues. And so, like I said, we have Yujay here. He works in this space and he leads a nonprofit. And I just want to start off by breaking down what's mental health to you? Like when you say mental health, that's very broad, and sometimes that can bring anxiety to people.
Yeah.
Like, what you trying to say? I'm crazy?
I know, right?
You know what I mean? But what is it?
Well, the first thing is mental health is a part of your health.
Period.
So period, right? like just so you got physical health, and you go to a doctor and hit the gym or do whatever you can, eat your diet and so forth to take care of your physical health. Your mental health is actually a very critical part of what I call whole body health. And I think that's where I like to start. And mental health is really just sort of your mind and how healthy is your mind. What are your thoughts like? Are you thinking positive thoughts, negative thoughts? How you manage your emotions and those kind of things. And they're so important, but like as John has said, it's something that we're not aware of, but because of COVID and some other things in our society, I think we're talking more about it. We're seeing more conversation around mental health. We're seeing more advertising with athletes around mental health. But yeah, mental health is definitely part of your health. Right. It's not something completely separate. In order to be fully healthy, you got to take your mental health into consideration.
Right. So it's no different from me going to get a checkup.
Come on.
Going to get a massage. Yep. Going to do whatever it is that's going to benefit me mentally, emotionally, however that is, right? All of that. I like to name my conversations, right? So this is titled Mental Break, right? And when you think about mental break, actually this particular area that I chose, and I'm not going to tell y'all where I'm at because I don't want nobody trying to follow me, but this is one of the many areas that I come to for a mental break. Like, I'm an extrovert, so people assume that I want to be around people all the time. Not necessarily the case. I sometimes venture off by myself and take a mental break with good food. For me, food, good food, good vibe, good music, that is a mental break for me.
Absolutely.
And I can name so many other things, but what does a mental break look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the same way. I'm generally an extrovert, and I feed off people, and I enjoy being around people, but I do have a fair amount of things that I do to take a mental break. And it could be as simple as, like you said, just going out and going to the bookstore by myself and reading a book there. I like reading, so that's one of the things I do as a mental break. But I find it interesting, my spiritual time, my time reading the Bible, my time sort of studying the Word of God, just prayer and meditation, those are also can be very mentally sort of freeing for me and mentally liberating.
Right.
And of course we know that physical activity can also be mentally very healthy as well. So whether it's exercising, I started playing pickleball, which it's kind of the fastest growing sport in America.
I still gotta join you.
Let's do this. Come on, we need more buzzing out for that. We need more ideas. That's what I mean. But I definitely enjoy some quiet time. I think that people don't realize, but extroverts actually need to have time to chill out.
You an extrovert?
You know what? I knew somebody told me wrong. You know what I mean? But
Yujay is definitely an extrovert, but I think he's a blend of both.
I think so.
Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Nothing's wrong with either.
I love it.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a citizen of the world.
All right.
I'm Frank and Ernest. It's on my guy.
So, in reference to mental break, you mentioned one of my favorite, actually two.
Okay.
Faith is definitely a mental break for me.
Yeah.
In reference to just reconnecting and just releasing, in reference to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That is my faith. I'm a Christian, but I always say I have a strong bond with Jesus Christ. Strong relationship, because it's a whole different level and feeling when you have a relationship versus just going to church and doing whatever you have to do.
Absolutely.
But fitness.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah, I know you're on it.
Well, not every day. Let me stop lying. But I definitely incorporate that in my regimen because, one, of course I want to look good, right? But what people don't realize is getting up early in the morning, you can work out at any time you want, but something about getting up early in the morning and just sweating, walking, going hard, whatever you do, it literally clears your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
It sets the tone. Yeah,
it sets the tone.
It sets the tone for your day, and it's just like eating a healthy breakfast or any of these things that you hear people say that the good habits to develop in the morning.
Yeah.
But it sets the tone. Doing something.
Yeah. Now, every once in a while, it makes you want to go back to sleep, so it has an adverse reaction. But usually it's beneficial to me. Real quick, you talked about yourself. Did you talk about your family? Your beautiful kids?
No, I didn't. Yeah, I think I kind of spoke very quickly on that, but yeah, no, I mentioned that I'm a dad. I have 4 amazing kids, and I was going to say this: spending time with them is actually a mental break.
And that's what I was getting at.
I know, kids can be very demanding. But I appreciate just being a dad. I absolutely love it, and I find it much more of a break sometimes, and of a source of energy, than something that sort of drains me. And, it's probably because I got decent kids, because they were crazy.
That would be a different story.
Thank God for good, beautiful, pretty chill kids.
What are their ages?
Oh yeah, we got 17-year-old.
I still can't believe it.
Yeah, he's about to be 18 in November. Then we got one who's going to be 16, going on 25. And then one who's going to be 14, and then one is going to be 12. So 2 boys, 2 girls, and absolutely enjoy my life. They are both a mental stressor and a mental break, but mostly a break.
So I love it. I forgot to say that Yujay is actually my cousin as well, / big brother, / mentor, / whatever it is I need him to be.
Pretty much.
And I love when we come out to eat, and actually we're going to get something to eat when we leave here. But I'm saying that because when we go out to eat, we have deep conversations. And really, it seems like it's therapy. Now, I'm not saying it's a substitute for therapy. If you need to see a therapist, right? But it's good to have not only good people, but people of faith, people that are wise, people that will steer you in the right direction versus steering you into your emotions, if that makes sense, right? Speaking about his kids, Yujay, he is recently divorced, I would say.
Probably about 2 years.
Oh, 2 years. Oh, time flies.
Yeah.
But when he was going through his separation, I was in the thick of grief. I lost my mom 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Wow, it's been 6 years. Anyway, lost my mom 6 years ago, right? And so I've gone through this process, this roller coaster of discovery of just where am I? And what's interesting is a lot of times people don't say it, but going through a divorce is grief.
Yeah, for sure.
It can be similar to losing a loved one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, people say it's like that. Yeah.
I mean, I can't say, but yeah. And you don't have to go into it if you don't want. The reason why I brought that up is because when we will meet for lunch, we both were in heavy grief, but we didn't necessarily acknowledge it. But the conversation, the stuff we talked about, the way you empowered me, but in the way I empowered, you want to touch on that? Do you even remember that time?
I do. I think one of the things you said just up front was the importance of these deep, vulnerable conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, so I read a book recently about mental health and the history of it, and the reality is before they were therapists, people have been having good conversations with being part of communities and villages, the whole village raise a child thing. But people have been part of healthy communities where they deal with trauma and they deal with hard things together. And the book I read looked at different sort of cultures, in different parts of the world, even sort of these sort of traditional groups, these tribes, and how they dealt with trauma. And so just having those healthy conversations, being able to sort of be vulnerable and pour out, is actually so huge. And I do remember those conversations, and yeah, I mean, how do I forget them? And just the way we were able to just bare our souls. And that's one of the things I've learned. I heard a guy say recently, and that he's learned that vulnerability is the new invincibility. So this new superpower.
That's good.
Because so many of us are wired to sort of keep things in and hold things private, and there's a real freedom in actually being able to find, not anybody now, you don't need to be putting a business for everybody or anybody, right? Be selective, but having people you trust, you can really sort of connect with and keep it real with.
Absolutely.
And take the mask off.
Absolutely.
And I think we've had that, and it's definitely one of the blessings in my life, and I'm fortunate to have a few folks in my tribe, or whatever you want to call them. We've been able to kind of have that relationship.
Absolutely. And the thing I love.
Helps.
You said it again?
It helps a lot.
No, it does. It's a game changer. But not only with me, but you spoke about faith. And so when you speak about mental health, I pair that with faith, right?
Absolutely.
So of course, you go see therapy, but that's not necessarily always the answer right away.
No.
And this may not be the popular approach, so forgive me, therapists and professionals who always immediately recommend therapy, but sometimes there's a step before therapy. Sometimes there's accountability partners. Sometimes there's, okay, let's sit down and really organize my thoughts and where I am and what, and
self-reflection.
Self-reflection.
Self-counseling, as I like to call it.
Now, too, I do understand that there are different levels and types of mental health. Mental health. Like some are, what is it?
Psychotic.
Yeah, psychotic and stuff. So
where you need drugs.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily covering that. It's more so the average person
Practical things.
who, practical ways of dealing with it. So we speak about accountability partners. During that time, you told me about a men's group that you attend, and I love it because it's like you have these men, not only men, but men of faith, coming together, pouring into your spirit during the probably, I wouldn't even say the worst, maybe the worst time, one of the worst times.
One of the most challenging times in my life,
yeah,
for sure.
And so just talk about how that has helped you take a mental break.
Yeah, I mean, being in a group with some guys who are willing to talk about what they're going through. I mean, whether it's divorce, financial struggles, health struggles with alcoholism, pornography, any number of things. That's just intense when men can sit down and do that. And I don't know. I always assume that women are really good at this, but I don't know if that's true. Maybe y'all can let me know. But I know that it's something that I see men growing in more. That era of being more vulnerable and being able to keep it real with each other.
You're right.
And having those guys, sort of my foxhole buddies, and kind of using a military term, has definitely made a huge difference. And I still maintain those relationships today.
That's good.
I always say that I'm in a different season, sort of just been some growth and maturation and learning and healing. You're going to go time back to the work.
Absolutely.
But those relationships are indispensable, and I still value them today, and I can't imagine my life without those relationships.
Right. Absolutely. I'm about to jump back to your kids, right? I forgot to capture that. How do your kids take a mental break? Because when you talk about divorce, the kids don't communicate sometimes what they're feeling, right?
Sure.
And so how do you go about just making sure they have that mental break? And when I say mental break, that's the title of the conversation. But how do you make sure they're healthy?
How do you make sure they're healthy? Right. It's interesting. I do sort of the same thing that we do, and I mentioned what I do with my friends. It's being vulnerable, leading by example, and be able to just share with them, like things have been rough. There are challenges, and hopefully modeling that because it's absolutely important. So part of our process is we have a sort of regular time of devotional and prayer. Faith is very important, and then there's really conversation, sitting down and asking those questions, because most kids aren't going to just come up to you and tell you like, this is what's going on with me.
You gotta get them in that mode.
You gotta kind of connect with them, and I do think that we have to be vulnerable. And whether you're a parent, you're a mentor, a teacher, or anywhere you're trying to influence kids, you have to be put a lead by example.
Right.
And I think they're looking at you and they're reading the book of your life and your story. So what are you putting out there? So to get back more closely to the question is, I try to have conversations with them. I try to create a space where they can come and speak to me. And one of the things I realize is it's not going to happen overnight. It's a long game, and for parents out there, parenting is a lifelong thing. I learned this. It's not like, okay, you got them until they're 18 or whatever. Right? It continues. And those are some of the things that I do. And it's sort of a process, a foundation that I'm building. And I really think there's some benefits now, but I'm really excited about the long-term benefits in terms of having kids who are hopefully a little bit more emotionally healthy.
And in tune with their feelings, because it teaches them how to communicate.
Absolutely.
And some people, they don't know how to communicate, whether intentionally or not, and that's the most frustrating thing, to know something is wrong with someone and they won't speak.
But just keep in mind, especially I think this may be true in our culture for some of the work I've done, and Jenna said this earlier, I am not a counselor or a therapist. I have an undergrad in psychology, but I just have a natural passion, just like if you found something you got interested in. I have a passion for mental health. I see it as something that's super important that we don't talk about, and there's a real major intersection between mental health and faith.
Right.
They're not two different things. The Bible has a ton to say about your mind.
Right.
God wants to renew our minds, and I think He wants us to have peace and all these things. So they're not two separate things. They're very much sort of connected. But I think that it's just all of that stuff goes together, and we want to kind of keep building in that area.
Have you heard of Dr. Anita Phillips?
I want to say
she is amazing.
Yes.
If you have not, if y'all have not,
maybe you did.
I think I have, because she talks about faith and mental health. Look her up, read her books, look at her sermons, her conversations. But it's Dr. Anita Phillips. She is a trauma therapist and a life coach expert, and she's also a pastor or a minister. I'm not sure how she refers to her title, but she's, I want to say maybe the first pastor or speaker that I've heard to really bridge mental health and faith.
Yeah.
And what I love about her too is she goes back to Genesis
Oh.
in reference to how we were. Yeah, we did talk about
Yeah,
this
we did, yeah.
because she speaks about just the earth and the ground and flowers and plants and how there's a lot of similarities with nature in us, right? So I don't want to go too deep into it because I don't want to misquote anything, but definitely check her out. She's amazing. She's absolutely amazing. Still on your kids. I don't know why we can't get off your kids yet, but I just think that's important, that you give them an opportunity to have a voice, especially given that we are Liberian Americans, but we Africans, we Liberians.
Right.
And growing up in an African household is a little different. Like parents ain't sitting down saying, tell me how you feel today. Now they probably are, right? But growing up, it wasn't quite like that.
No, ma'am.
Right?
No.
So.
And I mean, and I think that's why you have some people, who are adults and they still don't know how to.
Right.
They haven't found their voices, and it's a real challenge. You see this. You probably can look at your circles and see people who struggle finding their voice. And because they grew up in a cultural context, or even just an environmental context with whatever the dynamics were with their family, where your voice was not encouraged.
Right.
It wasn't important for you to be heard.
Right.
Well, one of the challenges that I've noticed is with people being able to kind of talk about their feelings, that they didn't learn how to do it. It wasn't thought, it wasn't encouraged, and they didn't have the right sort of environment where it's cultural or sort of, just the dynamics at home where their voice mattered, and so that's something that I'm trying to do with my kids. It doesn't mean that they're sort of constantly yapping and talking about everything. Sometimes I got to pull things out, and sometimes I just got to let things play out. But I think it's absolutely important to recognize that there are people who don't have that ability because they wasn't encouraged or they wasn't taught.
Right.
And that's a challenge. And but it can be worked through. It can be worked through, like a lot of things we got to deal with in life.
Absolutely. Now we're gonna get off your kids for a little bit, but I'm sure we're gonna come.
We can talk about them all.
We're gonna come back to the children.
Okay.
But I want to bridge it over to Africa, to our culture, Liberian culture, to be specific, to be exact. Because when you talk about mental health, the stuff that our people have been through, and again, Black Americans, I'm a Black American as well, so I'm not taking away from that experience, but I want to touch on the African experience right now. Because you see this polished gentleman looking like, money, right? But little do you guys know, for those who don't know Yujay, he was in the middle of a civil war. I don't know how long you guys were in the war in Liberia.
It felt like forever, but it's probably just a few months. But
a few months, one day, that's enough for me, right?
Exactly.
And I'm not going to get too deep into that. I did a conversation with Yujay, his mom, and his brother last year called, the Liberian War Story. So definitely I'm going to tag that link so you can find out more about Yujay and his family and his experience. He's also an author. Did you mention that during your introduction?
No, I need help with that. I need to do a better job.
That's key.
Movie. I'm going to work with John.
That's key, right.
Yeah.
But he's an author of a book which is talking about his experience, Son of Liberia. In a minute or two, can you just talk about, I guess, the motivation behind the book and your experience in the war?
Yeah, I think so. Back in 1990, there was a war that started in Liberia, sort of on the outskirts of the country, and we didn't think much about it, but eventually it made it to the city where we live and led a lot of people into becoming refugees, including myself and my family. And then a lot of people died, experienced a lot of very difficult things, right? A lot of things people would certainly call traumatic. When I came over to the U.S., I had some friends who thought the story was a real interesting story, and that there was some good arcs to it that made it worth telling. And so one of my good friends and mentor, Dave Verhagen, we partner on this book called Liberia's Son, and it's out there. And it just tells a story of resilience and faith and family and community, and just a very practical, easy to read book that I say I'll encourage people to definitely pick up and and definitely watch the episode John did with the family, because it gets a lot into that.
Definitely. Now you don't sound Liberian.
I big trouble you get. I've been in trouble.
You don't sound African.
I know, right? Well, you know, we've been here for a little bit.
I know.
so we picked up a few things.
I could always be inappropriate. He's being serious. I had to add some comedy to it. But here's what's interesting. When you talk about mental health, right? You and your brother and your mom were in trauma. I don't care how you describe it.
Yeah.
It was traumatic.
Yeah, for sure.
But when they came to the States, they came to our family, and then, you know, I think that was our first time meeting them, and so we literally formed an immediate bond. We would go over to their house, spend a night, spent a lot of time together. Not one time did I look at y'all like, oh man, they need help. Oh man, you can tell they've been through a war. They're traumatized. So, and y'all did not go through therapy. Well, professional therapy.
Exactly.
But talk about the therapy, because here's the thing, and really I want you to speak to the people of Liberia, your people, right?
Okay.
Outside of that, speak to those individuals in third world countries, and even here in America, but those who don't have access to those resources, or have access and don't have the money, or just don't want to do it. But talk to those people that have been through those traumatic situations. How did you do it?
Well, you know, it was definitely, I have to say, it was definitely by the grace of God.
Absolutely.
Right? It was definitely God's mercy and grace. Now, what did that really look like practically?
Right.
And what that looked like was we had family. We were never alone. One of the things that I think that makes trauma especially hard is when you're isolated and you have to go through it by yourself.
Yes.
And I know if we have in Liberia, we have community. People have around a lot of the world and many parts of the world, and especially I'm going to say Africa, there is a village. And use your village. So even though we went through what is a traumatic experience, I would say the reason why we're never traumatized is because we had our faith, we had family, we had community, and we shared those things together. And you know, and it's sort of carrying that load together made it a lot more bearable.
Right.
You know, when you said that about how when we were all younger, and you noticed that you didn't think we had any issues. You know, I never even thought about that.
We probably have more issues, aren't we? You know what I mean?
I know.
Like,
You know,
y'all also.
But I didn't realize that, but that really is because we were never alone. We had interest enough. We had space to talk and with family and friends about what was going on. You know, especially my brother and I, we would just talk and there were other people who could talk through what we were going through, the highs and the lows of that experience. And so we didn't have to keep it all inside. We were able to process it externally. And I heard somebody define trauma as unprocessed pain, right? So there's traumatic experiences. So you can go through a traumatic experience, but not necessarily be living in a state of living as a traumatized person and living with trauma. And it's how you process that pain. And that's why I really appreciated the conversations that we used to have, because it was always that processing of those
we would go deep. We went deep. Yeah.
And man, that's so liberating. That's so free. And so so those are some of the factors: the family, the shared community that we had, the faith that was anchored to that, and you mentioned Dr. Anita earlier, and sort of all the way she sort of speaks about faith and mental health. One of the things I've been reading through the Bible. And I said this to somebody, the Bible is probably the best book on mental health, you know. And I've read a few books. I probably have an unofficial mental health degree because I do find it interesting, so I read a few books. But the Bible has a lot of great stories. Yes. I mean, think about the trauma books went through in the Bible and how they would work through what is Moses, Noah, Joseph. You know, we can go on and on. And Job, of course, and of course Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior Himself. Yeah. And but there's an art there of just working through things with people, with faith, and not being isolated and withdrawn, and then being connected vertically to the world.
Right. No, you're hitting it. And again, I am a believer and supporter of therapists, right?
Yes.
Just like I'm a believer and supporter of going to the doctor.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I rarely go to the doctor because I do what it takes to avoid going to the doctor, right? Oops, sorry, it's about to rain. A little thunder there. I do what it takes to avoid going to the doctor. I do the work. Even if you're going to therapy, you still have to do the work. You still have to have other outlets, right? One thing is interesting when you say you have people and family. We were talking to some friends. You know, of course, we have a lot of friends and family that have been through the war, but everybody's experience is different. Still all traumatic to be, right? But their mindsets, or I should even say y'all mindsets, are different. That's why I love hearing the stories, because it helps to change my perspective on my privilege mindset, right?
Yeah.
So here you are, not you, but these particular friends, they were staying at a refugee camp in Ghana, right? No food, no electricity, no nothing.
Right.
Every Friday night, the Liberians will gather that were in the refugee camps in a certain area and just turn up.
Come on. Yeah.
Turn up. They would have a good time. I don't know if they were drinking, whatever they were doing, they were just partying, right? And that was their therapy.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't cure it, right? Because sometimes it's just suppressing what's there, but it was an outlet.
Yeah. It was a mental break.
It was a mental break.
Sort of this environment you're in that was where you're facing all these different, sort of very traumatic experiences.
It was a mental
break. Those are the kind of things we did. Whether it was going, to church or having little home churches, while living
prayer
in a
services,
refugee camp, prayer services, cooking together, eating together, some of those communal things we did. I think interesting enough, I do believe those things are part of dealing with those things. Could you be doing those things and still suppressing things? Absolutely, but
sometimes you feel like it's.
But sometimes I think in a lot of ways the intent is it can be positive in terms of helping you work through those things. The war is as scary as it was. Like any other things we go through, any other hard things, they can make us bitter or they can make us better.
That's true.
And so as you sort of talk to people and you look at people's life experiences, there's sort of this fork in the road type thing, this bifurcation of, did you get better? Did you get resilient? Did you get optimistic? Did you get hopeful? Or did you go down did you become something else? And I like to think that, that all of us have the opportunity to use our experiences for positive or for
absolutely.
negative.
No, absolutely.
And I've seen that with your life, I think with mine, and there are plenty of stories. Those are stories we like to read.
Those are stories, yeah. And you can even bridge it to America, right?
Yeah.
The trauma from slavery, from civil rights, from racism that we still deal with today.
Yes.
Whether it's covertly done or in your face. That's traumatic. And it's traumatic because even when you think about incidents with certain police officers and all of that, it's like you're trying to figure out how to be. Some people literally have trauma from that.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's just what you do about it. Now let's jump. So I wanna give a flip side of this to make this balance, right?
All right.
And so when I say, of course, I'm a believer, a supporter of therapy. We talked about how family and going to the gym and doing all these other things can be your therapy, where you may not need a therapist. But I want to talk to those people who are struggling internally.
Yeah.
They're doing all these things and living life, but deep inside, they are struggling.
Yes.
Let's talk about that, because now you're to the point where you need help.
Yeah.
You need to go to the doctor. And I think maybe therapy needs to be rephrased to say, why not go see a doctor versus you need therapy? Because it lands different. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in your field, especially with Psychology for All, is what I'm bridging to.
Sure.
Talk about that. Like, what do you guys see? How are you guys how are you guys a resource for the community?
Yeah, one of the things that the challenges that we have here in sort of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, they do a healthcare assessment every few years, and the last one was done in 2019, and it said that mental health and access to care are the top two health challenges facing our city, and I think that's probably true in underserved sort of low-income communities across the country. And so we are focused on making sure that people are aware of the fact that there's places to go and have a conversation.
Right.
I think of therapy, I think people should say, go have a conversation. Just,
go
the people who really probably need therapy are the people who are not comfortable having this conversation. The people who are still trying to figure out, put language and context over what they're feeling and different things like that. And so we facilitate people who can't afford it, but realize they want to do something about their mental health care. We facilitate them getting access to some of the best therapists in Charlotte.
Okay.
Right. So this is not the folks who just graduated from high school or not high school, college with their degrees or master, but these are folks who are seasoned psychotherapists, counselors, who are able to help these folks. And we also try to do a few things. One, we offer the financial piece, but we try to make sure that our therapists represent the racial and ethnic diversity of the community we serve. A lot of times, people don't realize that. It really matters who you go to.
Right.
Because some people just don't understand some of the culture and the
Right.
nuances.
It's important.
And I think that's important. So we try to make sure that we represent that. I think that's been one of the challenges with especially African Americans and Hispanic, I would say, from what I've read and what I see in my day-to-day work, accessing to these services is like, well, you know, I want to talk to somebody that look like her, you know, because if I want to talk about whatever,
I want you to get it. I don't have to break it down.
Exactly. And so those are some of the things we're addressing. I'm really happy to be able to share that we are seeing more and more people who you might consider lower income, who you might think are the people who don't want to kind of have these conversations. More people are taking advantage of it, and COVID brought, for us, I mean, as a nonprofit agency, COVID really helped our numbers. We saw more people saying, I want to have a conversation because I'm dealing with stress, anxiety.
It's too much.
By the way, I'm struggling with the stress of my life now has made me realize that I got some things from my past that I need to work through. And if I can change that, I can actually probably change my family and maybe even change a community, a generation.
Right.
And so those are some of the things we've been doing, and I'm really thankful to be part of that.
That's amazing. One thing I want to touch on, again, speaking about the African culture, right? I can just imagine, like, one of our aunties, and I'm not talking about first generation Liberian, I'm talking about the African mindset, the African way, the colloquy, the heavy accent, all of that. How do you see them in therapy? And what therapist would you pair them with to be able to get to that heart, which is many layers?
It is many layers. You know, I think the first thing that has to happen is somebody has to realize that there's a need, right? There's a value. You know, somebody asked me once, and I'm going to get to this to your question. Do you all help people realize that they need mental health sort of care? I said, well, less so. We're more focused on when you realize you want this care, that you want something to change. We are here to sort of provide that bridge between sort of your needs and the access and the financial barriers and that are existing and the cultural barriers to then help you get the help you need. But if they want to enter and say, look, I think something's going on here, and I think I want to really explore and learn more and learn more about this mental health thing, I would definitely want to pair them with somebody who understands the culture.
Right.
As I said earlier, and somebody who who understands their life stage and everything, because I think one of the challenges in therapy is that they're taking sort of this, there may be some of this cookie cutter approach where it's like, well, if it works for you, it's going to work for me. And I think there's some truth to that, but I think in a lot of ways, I think it needs to be a little bit more individualized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because while we are similar in a lot of ways, so we do have these unique differences.
Absolutely.
And so I would be super happy for one of my internet to say, listen, I think we want to do something about this.
I need you to speak to the aunties and the cousins. Those are okay. Speak to them and tell them why they should come to therapy.
I'm telling you, if you know yourself and you're being honest with yourself and you know that you're having some of these struggles and you know that you're struggling with sleep and you know that your mind can't rest.
Yes.
Right. So these are things you can hide, but you know what it's like. How hard is it for you to be able to just sit down for late night and have a good night's sleep? How hard is it for you to be able to shut your brain down without thinking about this, and all the other things that you got to worry about? If those things are happening, if you're living with hopelessness and you've got fear or anxiety, those are all signs, and they're saying maybe you should go have a conversation with somebody. Right. And as I said earlier, and we were talking about this is just part of you taking care of yourself. It's just part of taking care of yourself and you being your best self. And so, Ente, Uncle, I beg you, seriously, because what you may not realize is all that stuff that inside it is causing problems, and you may be able to hide it from people, but it will come out at some point, right? But it's also impacting your own quality and sense of health and happiness, and that's too important. Right. That is just way too important. Right.
Right. No, that's good, especially with the way you broke it down. But it's okay, and whether you African, American, white, Hispanic, whatever, it's literally okay. It is. But I know some people may have anxiety of going to the doctor itself, so of course they'll have anxiety there. But I just think we just need to continue to talk about it to let people know that it's okay, and you're not crazy. No, right? You're not crazy.
You're smart. You're trying to take care of your health. You're trying to be your best self, and I think that's the way I see it. You're not crockett, as we used to say. You're not crockett. You're actually quite bright and quite smart. You start taking that initiative.
One thing that I want to touch on, of course, we talked about grief. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but grief is not so much. It's not related to mental health as it relates to, oh, you need to go see a therapist, right? Like in reference to the symptoms, but they overlap. Is that correct? Or how?
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
But the thing is, they overlap so much that, am I grieving or do I, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a grief, and again, there's a place where we all need to grieve because it's real, right? I mean, we deal with pain, we deal with heartaches, and one of the things that I find really, sort of disturbing is when people try to avoid grieving.
You cannot. You can try.
You can try, but it never really works. It's like trying to hold your breath.
Right.
You can only do it for so long.
Right.
And you have to sort of let that out. And so there's a point.
Can I interject real quick? When they do that, I think that's when it goes over to spills over to the mental health space.
Exactly.
And causes.
Exactly. She's reading my mind.
Oh, sorry.
Because I was going to say, but there's a point, I think, and I don't know if there's a definition of, okay, you've got 2 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, but there's a point where that grief becomes your identity, right? And in a diverse way, because it can become a positive thing, a source of strength, a source of resilience, a source of hope and betterness, but it can also be a source of bitterness and hopelessness and anxiety and stuff. And when that becomes your identity, then I think it's sort of you're drifting into that space of sort of a mental health issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. So, Mr. Harris, I think I want to give you the floor for a few minutes to kind of talk about what you've seen from your experience in leadership at Psychology for All, because I'm sure you guys encounter a lot of different people. You do a lot of different research, have a lot of conversations. Start off by just talking about why do you think, and I know we all have our opinions and thoughts, but just from what you've experienced, what is the challenge? What is the hesitancy of people wanting to get therapy? Because sometimes it's the resources and finances, right?
Yeah.
Just talk about that a little bit.
Well, the access is a real challenge.
The access.
Therapy is not cheap.
It's not.
No, it's not, and I know. But and that's sort of. But there are plenty of organizations out there trying to bridge that gap and help sort of make sure people can afford and be able to get certain services. One of the biggest challenges, I think, in our culture is that there's this mindset that if we've been through so much, we're strong. I don't been through this, that, and the third, and I'm strong. And so, therapy is for people who are weak. By the way, I had somebody ask me once, do I need to go to therapy? I have a relationship with the Lord, and I'm a pretty strong person. Yeah, but you're struggling with anxiety. You're struggling with sort of some paranoia. You're struggling with just hopelessness. So maybe you need to if you don't have that community around you. But I think there's this perception that because we've been through so much, because you talk about racism, you talk about slavery, you talk about as a people, so there's sort of generational things and cultural things, or just in our own personal lives. A lot of us, have been through any number of things, whether it's a civil war, a divorce, a violence, growing up in certain environments, certain communities, certain home environments, and all of those things do shape us. But it doesn't mean that your mental health is still not important. Just because you've survived those things,
right? You
can survive those things in a way that leads you to becoming a celebrity, leads you to becoming an athlete, leads you to becoming an academic or very successful on the surface, but still be a mess on the inside. And that is okay. It's okay. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. But that's one of the things people believe. I think the biggest thing I would say is that we believe that we're fine because, you know what, I lived through a civil war. Then I went to this college.
Right. So if I can do that, I can do anything.
I can do it.
It's
not true. It doesn't work like that. And it absolutely does not work. But I think that's probably one of the biggest factors in hurdles to people using this.
And I know I still want you to run with it, but I have to spark there because I am guilty of that.
Yeah.
Especially, it's like a barrier of protection, right? So and this is exactly how I say, I lost my mom. If I could live without my mom, I could live without anything and anyone.
Right.
So that means that if people hurt me or whatever, I'm
Can't
good.
face me, right.
That's not how life works.
No.
That's not how this
I mean,
works.
let's be honest. You're not being honest with yourself.
You're really
one
not.
of the phrases I use a lot with people now. It's like people say, be honest with me. I use the phrase with my children. Be honest with yourself.
Be honest with
I
yourself.
say, be honest with yourself. One of my favorite lines studying Shakespeare many years ago. There's a line in Hamlet where the guy tells his son who's off to college, to thy own self be true. Like be true to yourself. Keep you and the rest of the line, But it's like, and it must be always followed that as the sun follows the moon or whatever, Don't be false. No, I ain't trying to go in there. That was way back.
He probably
I think that's an overpriced education. I'll tell you that, as you all know. But I remember that line resonating with me. Be true to yourself.
Be true to
so
yourself.
Yes, you can fool me. I can fool you. I know how to wear the mask.
Right.
But they get to this point where you realize I don't have it all together.
But to be honest too, sometimes, like when I used to say that, it wasn't even wearing a mask. I believed it.
Right.
Bye. If I can live without my mom, please.
Right. Yeah.
Ain't nobody more important than my mom. I believe that.
Yeah.
And I can see my mom in heaven like, nah, Johnny.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Johnny.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I think it's important to say that because I think it's an immediate defense mechanism.
Sure.
But then while you're defending yourself, you're holding back all that other stuff and it's dealing with your mental health.
And I mean, I'll say this, and I'm going to look directly into the camera and say this. You know yourself. You know how you're feeling. You know what your thoughts are like. You know these things that, yes, you can kind of hide from everybody else, but you know yourself. And be honest with yourself. Are you able to find peace? Are you able to shut down and really, have 6-7 hours of sleep? Or, what is your outlook on life? Do you feel hopeful? How do you, when you look at yourself in the mirror, how do you feel about yourself? And if the answer to those things, it's not exactly the way you want it to be, then it's okay.
It's okay. That's the thing. There's no right or wrong answer.
It's part of being a human being. It's okay. There was a season in my life where I felt really hopeless, and I mean, the war, living through that experience, there's a lot of fear, a lot of why would go into this, a lot of questioning my faith, and then going through a divorce, and that sort of challenges you emotionally, and it sort of rocks you, and you've got to be honest with yourself about that and be able to be vulnerable with people and say, you know what, I ain't got it all together right now. I'm going through some stuff.
And I'm good.
And it's okay. And it's okay. And it goes back to the whole thing we're talking about the conversations we've had. It really starts there.
It does.
It really starts
So we
there.
were raw. Like,
That's right.
We didn't hold nothing back.
And that's hard to do. And I know it's
got to be
a
trusted source.
Yeah, but I would encourage anybody, find somebody you trust, and you start to take those baby steps. It didn't happen. John, our conversation didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
We obviously have a relationship, and as the seasons sort of happened in our lives, there was convergence that brought us to this point where let's keep it real.
Yeah, keep it real.
And there are people out there who you probably know them. And it's a matter of taking that step, and then you may be that person, that safe person for somebody, right? And to somebody to come to and say, things are rough right now, and that's okay. And let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think that people don't like is nobody likes being fixed, right? So that's another thing. The idea, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to go to therapy so that somebody can fix me. Well, I mean, you wouldn't consider yourself being fixed when you go to the doctor per se. You're just getting taken care of, so you can be your best self and your better self. And that's sort of I think that language. We have an opportunity to change that language, because I wouldn't say when you go to therapy or when you're sort of in a therapeutic situation. Like I consider, like you said, our conversation was a therapeutic.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. And it wasn't even, real quick, it wasn't even planned. It just happened.
Oh, it just happened, that's right.
Right? We didn't say, okay, we're going to get together and talk about X,
together.
Y,
Here are the
and
talking
Z.
points. You didn't have those cue cards or whatever those things
Yeah,
are.
right. It just flowed. It flowed.
But yeah, and I think that if you're not fixed, you're not being fixed. Mm-hmm. You're just getting some help to be your best self.
Right.
So many people, I mean, y'all know people who are, I used to be really impressed with very successful people who had all the education and the job titles and everything. And now, I mean, not that I don't find that valuable, but it's absolutely not high on my list. I'm not impressed. I'm not even impressed with myself.
I am
anymore.
not impressed. No, seriously.
You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest, right? It's like,
seriously.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be real.
I'm happy for you. That's fine. You got some good education.
But when you talk about growth, and I'm not saying that's all you cared about in the past, but those things matter to you, right?
Absolutely.
Like you know those accolades.
Yeah.
But now as life happened, you like, I mean, it's good,
Right.
but how's your mental health?
Yes,
How's
that's
your
right.
heart?
Your mental.
Do you have peace?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I was really interested in, there was a period for a season where I just could barely get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And now, man, shoot, I think that's something
You
like
sleep like a
know how
baby.
you call me early in the morning?
Yeah,
Don't
pick it, don't pick up.
Don't call me.
Don't pick up.
I start about 9 o'clock. If I'm,
Now leave him voice memos because Yujay ain't gonna pick up.
Well, but it's just enjoying, not something, just not even just sleep and rest.
Yeah.
Right, which is a little different thing,
Yeah.
and there's a, and if you're if you're struggling with just sleeping,
Right.
get help.
Get help.
You're not getting fixed. You're just becoming your best
Just
self.
getting,
You're just getting help.
just getting help. One thing I want to add too, though, in reference to talking to people, because again, with you and I, Yujay's my cousin. He's always been my cousin. We've always talked, but in this season, God knew we needed each other. So he brought us together like we were just going to lunch, not realizing he was setting it up. But we were called, we're graced, we have capacity for each other, right? Be careful. Make sure you have capacity to hear people's problems. And literally, I've learned to be bold, and it's hard when people start to dump. And not saying they're just unloading. I literally, even this weekend, I was like, I'm sorry, I really don't want to hear anymore. I said, I can't. I said, I heard enough. We prayed, please. And I said, I get it, but I can't wear that right now.
Right.
Literally, I had to be honest with myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So, because then you're helping somebody else, but then...
Yeah. People ask me all the time, why don't you just go and become a therapist or a psychologist or everything? It's like, it's about that capacity. You have to have the ability to be able to take things on, but then, put a sort of a firewall between that. And I don't think right now at the season I've been in my life, sort of growing and transitioning myself, I don't feel like it's the right season. I love therapy. I love psychology. I love that whole space, obviously. But to your point, do I have the capacity? Do I have the margin? Bandwidth, another term people use. And you got to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Too many people are going to the mental health space to become counselors and therapists who haven't really taking care of their own self.
You are absolutely right.
This is one of the things.
You are absolutely right.
I've heard this, and hopefully the mental health people don't come after me, but I have heard that a lot of the people who go into that space, into the mental health space, also face a lot of challenges. And it's like, well, I want to help other people. Well, how are you helping yourself?
How are you helping yourself? You putting your mask on
Are you
first.
helping yourself? Because, but it's acceptable now, but if I would talk to a therapist, I want to find out how vulnerable that person is. What's their journey like?
Right. The problem I have, with the reason why these therapists, they probably need to take care of themselves as well too, but let me be real careful how I say this. There's now a saying, a phrase that says you need therapy and God, or God and therapy. Like they're putting therapists on the same level as God. That may not be it, but to me, that's how I interpret it, right?
Yeah.
And therapy is a resource. It's not the source, right? And so, like I even heard someone say they had their therapist on speed dial. I'm like, man, sometimes I was like, are we praying for these therapists that are helping these people, right? Because we have to help the therapists help us. Am I making sense?
You are. I mean, you can go to therapy all you want, but if you don't put in the work, right? If you don't make the effort to sort of make those behavioral changes and make the choices that help you, it's not going to go anywhere. And a lot of people have these weird codependency. I actually can think of several people with their therapists, and I think a good therapist will probably be mindful of that and realize that doesn't really help, because this is not necessarily I'm on speed dial because told me.
Well, this was a celebrity that said it. Still,
right. But you've told me to do A, B, and C, and I just seem to not be willing to put the effort. So I keep calling you so you can tell me A, B, and C. That's good to the therapist, just from a money perspective. But that's bad therapy.
Right. No, I get it. I get it.
That doesn't make change. So,
yeah. All right, Yujay. So it's starting to get dark. We've been here for a minute, just like we do when we go out to eat, just talking on and on and on. But no, this is good conversation. We do need to wrap up, but before we wrap up, I want to touch on relationships, dating and marriage, because you represent both, right?
Yep.
So talk about mental health as it relates to that, and I say that because one of the $1 million question that I always get. So who are you dating? Why aren't you married? I'm just like, and here's the thing that I really want to tell people, and I guess I can look at the camera and I'll pass it to you, Jay. You know, when it comes to mental health, there's a lot of people who are married, who are dating, who have the world, who can do whatever they want to do, but they can't enjoy it because mentally they're off. They can't see past what they see. They don't have peace. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but there are a lot of people out here struggling.
Yep.
But they're in relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're trying to find relationships.
Yep.
Right? That's dangerous.
It can be.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. So talk about that.
I mean, so I've learned that, physical compatibility, how he looks, how she looks, all that stuff, that's cool and good. But I think emotional and mental compatibility, what does that look like? And that's something that I'm kind of writing on. You know, again, as I told people, I said earlier, I'm a mental health kind of fan, enthusiast. I love this. I find it very interesting personally. And I'm sure there's probably some real good academic, psychological, deep research on it. But what does it look like to assess somebody from an emotional and mental compatibility perspective? It could be something like, how did this person deal with stress? When somebody's stressed out, do they shut down, internalize, and because they don't have a voice, which is a red flag, and so at least to know, or are they able to communicate, in a healthy, balanced way, measured way, or is it, outbursts and yelling and all that kind of stuff? How do you all process the world in terms of, this person seems to be more of a big thinker, this person seems more of a conservative, seem to be very content with what he or she has, and those kind of things. How have they dealt with pain in their life? I mean, if you're gonna really have a date somebody, or certainly in a marriage, we bring all these baggages that we have, and we hide them, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I always find it fascinating that people can be in relationships, and especially in marriage, where they're physically together, and yet have so much to hide about their emotional and mental side. Right. I find that's scary, but it is. I mean, you just look around the relationships that you're aware of, and you'll see how much that is. Where you've got people who are physically together, but so far apart emotionally. And so I think that even with my 17 going on 18-year-old. We talk about just like, we talk about thinking through sort of what does it look like, what mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. What are some of the things to look for there? So don't just think about, how does she look and whatever, but what is her thought life like? How does she see herself? What is your sense of self, your outlook? I mean, all those things become really important. And if you're with somebody who, in a relationship, and I would say serious relationship with somebody who seems to have a lot to hide, I don't know. To me, that's a little bit of a challenge. Because I think there has to be that emotional sort of transparency,
and I can't even get the word out. Emotional intelligence as well, in reference to all of that. And the reason why I brought that up and wanted you to touch on it. It's not even to throw shade for people who ask those questions about when you're getting married or when you're having kids and all of that. It's just like, to me, you're worried about the wrong things. First, find out how the person is doing.
Come on.
Right?
Yeah.
That's all I'm getting at, because there's a lot of people, they don't care about their status. They just want to be able to sleep at night. Or they want to be able to see color. Somebody can look at this wall and just see black.
Yep.
And I'm not just talking, but it's people that I've encountered and have had conversations with. So it's more for just a compassion side. Like, start finding out more about people and less about their business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
That's good. Really get to know people. Ask those questions, and I mean, I think that, to me, you can ask those questions early. And you don't have to save it till whenever down the road. I mean, just even early, if you think that you want to seriously date somebody, not a bad idea to start ask this question.
Of course, we always have representatives.
There you go.
You got to be able to see past. Like, I see you.
That's
anyway,
right. That's right.
But no, thank you for that. Thank you for touching on that.
Thank you for inviting me. As I said, and this is something that I find very fascinating. Caveat, she said it earlier, disclaimer, whatever. I am not a a sort of licensed counselor or anything like that, but I find the topic and the space of mental health really important, and I'm really just thankful for the opportunity.
Yeah, amazing. I'm really thankful that you accepted my invitation to do this, right? Because while you are an extrovert, you're not a person that wants to be in front of camera, right?
No,
but you do it so well. No, you're not working on it. You're doing it.
Okay, thank you.
You did a very good job. You always do. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. But as I said, I'm Janet Cape with a Social Light Production. You can follow me on YouTube, A Social Light. That's LIGHT Production. No S at the end. Also on Instagram, A Social Light Production. Facebook, A Social Light Production. I want to hand it off to Yujay, especially as it relates to, make sure I'm getting it right, Psychology for All. I want you just to provide them with information of how they can reach out. Also, if someone is interested in seeking therapy or being a therapist in your portal, how they can do that.
Yeah, so our website, psychologyforall.org, has all the information you need. We also have, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram at psychologyforall.clt, and but any one of those platforms you can kind of get to know what we do. And we do have applications and sort of information on how to become a therapist, and we are looking for more therapists, especially I'm going to say Black and brown therapists. So if you are out there and you're a therapist and you would love to serve the community, you do get paid. We pay our therapists.
It's not volunteer. That's good to say. It's not a volunteer.
Our therapists get paid. It's free for the client.
That's good to point out.
But Psychology for All, we have all the information there. We have applications in both English and Spanish. So we have I think everything you'll need to either to learn about the organization, to learn about becoming a client, and to learn about becoming a therapist, and then even some of the events that we may host throughout the year just for the community. So please come check us out.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Harris, thank you so much. We will continue our conversation when we go out to eat.
And she's buying.
Yes, actually I am. I am treating my cousin, yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I got that on tape.
But the next time we go out, he's going to treat. We're going to go somewhere.
No doubt.
Thank you, Yujay. So we actually have one more close, right? We forgot to mention how they can find your book, Liberia's Son.
Yeah, the book is on Amazon, and if you don't see it there, just keep checking. There's been high demand for the book, fortunately, and we're looking at doing some more reprints and so forth. So just keep checking, and you'll see it. Thank you.
All right. Well, speaking of Liberia's Son, as we close out, right? Of course, I mentioned that we are Liberian American. You were born in the heart of Liberia, right? Of Africa, right?
Yeah.
And so, for those who may not be familiar with Liberia, we have 16 African tribes. I represent the Kru tribe. You represent the Bassa tribe.
Bassa tribe, yeah.
Your mom, my sweet auntie, speaks it fluently.
Yes.
So there's no way you don't know Bassa, even if it's one or two words, right?
I got a couple of words.
Okay. So as we say goodbye, I want you to close us out and speak to your people in Liberia, abroad and here in Bassa. Translation, thank you, God. Good night or goodbye.
God and goodbye. Yeah.
See, I know Bassa. Thank you so much, Yujay. Appreciate you. Okay, Mr. Yujay Harris. So we just wrapped up an amazing conversation around mental health, subtitled Mental Break, right? I just want you to talk about your experience and I guess whatever you would like to leave the people with after this conversation.
Yeah, I think this is such a critical topic and we don't talk about it enough in our community. And I like the fact that you established that we're going to talk about this in not a sort of scientific, very doctory, healthcare kind of academic way, but just in a very practical way, talking about our own struggles and the struggles we see with our friends and family. So it's been really fun. It's always chill hanging out with John Ed, and I'm glad we were able to have this conversation.
One quick thing I forgot to mention about the conversation, you in your own personal mental health story. I don't know if you recall when you got over that hump of grief and just transformation of life, you looked like you were glowing. Like I was inappropriate, but I said you look like you had a really good laxative. That's how I describe it. I know it's inappropriate, but talk about that feeling and how the mental health came into play with you being renewed.
Yeah, I mean, I had to sort of sit with a lot of things, a lot of heavy things, process things, try to make sense out of things that I didn't understand. And that was actually very healthy. A lot of times people want to kind of get past those things as quickly as we can. Whatever it is that's hard to process, that's hard to really kind of work through, that takes a lot of mind space. But I spent time, and I think that's probably what you saw, that season of carrying this thing and saying, you know what, I'm going to sit with this.
Right.
I'm not going to avoid it. I'm not going to run away from it. I'm not going to try to jump into the next thing to sort of numb it. I'm going to really wrestle with it. And I think then at some point you get enough, sort of discipline, and you get enough health that sort of builds in, and it's like, I'm good. And I didn't deny it. It wasn't because I tried to run around it or skip it. It's because I actually dealt with it and worked through it.
Right.
And I think that's what you notice and that was my laxative.
And that was freedom.
It's absolute freedom. Freedom. Come on.
Freedom.
All
right.
Freedom.
Well, thank you, Yujay. Hopefully everybody will see benefits from this conversation to be free as well.
Come on. Let's get stuff.